It's so nice to have you
Max,
here.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
We've been meeting many times in Zoom and in Teams and all that, but
Nice
now
to
you're
meet in
here
real life.
in Stockholm.
In Stockholm,
And
yeah.
I promise you, it will be damn cold here.
You were right. You were right. It's very cold.
Exactly.
Very cold.
Yep, good. Welcome. Stage is yours.
Thank you, Mats, and thank you, Wednesday Relations, for inviting us. It's great to be here in Stockholm. I'm trying to manage my microphone with the long hair, the lockdown hair that I'm sporting today. It was, as you can see, I've taken Maria's advice and I brought a sparring partner with me. And hopefully Anthony's going to provide some insight later on. I'll introduce us first. I'm Andrew Baggs. I am a digital strategist at UE. So my role at UE is to work with our customers at the beginning of their journey, and also as our relationship moves forward, to make sure that we're on the same page. Because often when you're working with an agency, one of the difficulties is that the clients feel like they're handing over something that's very important, and the agency just goes away and does something. So it's really important for us as an agency that we work together, and the strategist role is to make sure that there's consensus and everyone's buying into the same vision, and we can then more successfully achieve that.
Yeah, I'm Anthony. So I'm a marketing technology consultant at UE. And my sort of role is more about sort of advising our clients and then also making what they want to happen an actual reality. So it's kind of translating those disparate thoughts into something that can actually work in a practical sense.
It was really nice to hear Joe at the beginning talk about how marketing automation goes way beyond just a platform. And it's something that we've been doing a lot of work with our clients recently around helping clients choose a marketing automation platform, whether it be their first marketing automation platform or an upgrade of their existing marketing automation platform. And one thing we really try and focus on in our strategic sessions is not just what your marketing automation platform can do, but how it communicates with the other tools that you're using in the organization. And actually, if we're talking about marketing automation as a concept, that's far more important than what the marketing automation platform that you choose does. So whether it's integrating with your CRM, but even to Slack, as we talked about just now, we need to consider the whole suite of technology, but also people and processes that go into that marketing automation approach. And we really buy into that. So UE as an agency, we're an agency of around 200 professionals. We've got lots of experience and we work in 8 offices. So we've got an office here in Stockholm, but Anthony and I came over from Leeds in the UK. And those offices have kind of been built out over time. So UE has developed as an agency from a kind of legacy of being a web development agency, but bringing in other parts of digital or the digital ecosystem so that we've grown. And in the UK, we are in our Leeds office really focused on marketing automation at the moment because we come from a background of delivering marketing automation transformations in sort of historically B2B organizations that have a very complex or have a more complex product or service set. So we've used tools like Marketo, Salesforce Pardot, Eloqua to deliver those. But working on web development projects in e-commerce as well, we also use other marketing automation platforms that are more geared around growth and around e-commerce. So we're having to adapt in some ways the way that we work to change the way that we're working with different types of client sets so that we can deliver marketing automation for B2B and B2C organizations. You can see here on this line, which shows the kind of services that we offer, that MarTech or marketing automation is actually just a very small part of what we offer as an agency. And we consider ourselves to be a full service digital agency because we have that digital platform build ability alongside these other expertise in-house. And you can see right on the left-hand side here, we have strategy and consultancy. And although it kind of plays a similar size role on this timeline, it's really important that that's at the beginning because that's something we really focus on with every one of our clients, no matter what services we're offering them, is at the beginning, really getting that strategic approach in place, working with a strategist to make sure that both our team and the client team are on the same page. So you can see here just a small selection of some of our clients, and we had about 4 pages of client logos in this deck before I stripped it back to one. And you can see there are some quite well-known B2C brands in there. We'll have B2B brands that we work with. So we have a very diverse client set. We're working with very different marketing automation platforms, very different ways of working within organizations. But fundamentally, the way that we approach the challenge of marketing automation with any of these businesses is the same, or there are similarities in the way that we approach it. So we can't be really specific about how we're going to do or make changes with a specific organization, but we can be specific about the way that we would try and approach this challenge. And the first thing up in the top left-hand corner there is we make sure we take a strategic approach. And as I mentioned, that is around being on the same page, making sure that we have consensus, making sure that we understand what we're working towards. So one of the first things that we do in our strategy workshops is to dream big. So we have a session, and it's not necessarily that we've got the right people in the organization to define the whole organization's goals in the room, but by getting everyone on the same page and thinking about what we call a BHAG, or big, hairy, audacious goal, allows us to go beyond the limitations potentially of the platform or the things that we're trying to achieve in the marketing function, and actually think about what the organization is trying to achieve. And a BHAG, or a big, hairy, audacious goal, is about dreaming big. So we could be talking about, we talked about profit, it could be about making more profit for the organization, but it could be about having our product in every kitchen in the world, or it could be about saving the world by reducing carbon emissions. It's a really lofty goal, but it's something that the organization needs to be focused on. And if we can think about those lofty goals when we set our smaller visions or objectives in our program, we can make sure that we are at least aligning to that overall business objective that we ultimately should be thinking about when we're putting any kind of change in place. So we've now defined these lofty goals. We're going to save the world. But we're not going to save the world with one marketing automation program or one nurture flow. So we're going to have to think about how we're going to get there. How are we going to save the world? How are we going to reduce carbon emissions and put our products in every kitchen in the world? We need to make progress towards that goal, and we need to make progress by setting out steps to get there. But when I talk about making progress, it's not about sort of defining the steps and doing one step at a time. It's about thinking how we can do smaller versions of the big goal. And I worked for a long time with a charity client who was doing a lot of marketing automation. You know, charities have huge need for marketing automation around donations, and we saw it in the slides earlier with the Red Cross. And when someone's giving, we can use marketing automation to thank them, and we can kind of take them through a supporter journey. And this charity was wanting to do some marketing automation around charitable giving and people who were running for that charity in a marathon. And they wanted to set out a 12 email program in the run up to a marathon. And each of these emails had different bits of content about how to prepare, but also how to fundraise for the charity. And it was an amazing program. They mapped it out on A3 paper with all the different decisions and the flows and the emails and the content they needed. And they've been working on this for 12 months. So they've been spending a long time getting the content together, but they'd not launched anything. So the people who'd run the marathon this year had not got any emails. They'd had no engagement because they've been spending so long building this big dream. We need to make sure, and I see this all the time with people who have these lofty ambitions, we need to make sure when we're thinking of these big dreams, we can scale it down to say, right, well, let's get that first email in place that thanks them for signing up to run for us. When that second email is ready, let's get that live. So we can build on it so the people now, our customers now, are getting a good experience, even though the people in the future, those customers in the future, are going to have our ultimate goal. And the final one there in the bottom right-hand corner that I mentioned, that's this kind of step-by-step approach about staying accountable. The way that we do it at UE, and it's by no means the only way or necessarily the best way, is by making sure at the end of our strategy sessions, when we've sat down with our clients and we've worked out where we're trying to get to, is to build a roadmap that is keeps people accountable. So we have defined steps on that roadmap. We have named actions, and we have deadlines for those steps on that roadmap. But we make sure that that roadmap is flexible. So we need to make sure that if we don't hit a target, it's not a problem. We can move it. We can maybe change. We've talked about the fact that everything changes, and that our only constant is change. So we need to make sure when we're building strategy, when we're building roadmaps, that we build them with that flexibility, with that agility in mind, so we can change as we go. And we kind of build in quarterly business reviews into our plans when we're working with our clients to make sure that we can do that and make sure we can continue to be strategic beyond that first starting point that we have. So we're going to talk about the 5 fundamentals that we think kind of underpin success in marketing automation. It's pretty tiny, I can't read that, but I should remember. The first one, we're going to talk about data, we're going to talk about content, sales alignment, revenue attribution, and then we're going to talk about ABM, or customer lifetime value marketing. And actually, it's really nice today to listen to all the other presentations, and those of you who've been listening online. All of these things that we're going to talk about have been mentioned by different people today, so it kind of gives us a bit of confidence that actually what we're talking about does resonate with at least the people in the room here. Underneath that, obviously, strategy kind of underpins what we're doing, but these are the 5 things, if we're going to focus on anything, we think you should focus on. So first up, data. And we've talked a lot about data today. We just always come across the first challenge when we're looking at a marketing automation transformation or setting up a marketing automation platform is making sure we've got the data right. And that's around getting the data structure right, but also having the foresight to know what you're going to do with your data. Because you will hold lots and lots of data. We've talked about having this huge data lake, but you're going to have a marketing automation platform where theoretically you could bring all of that data in. But why? Why do we need the data? What are we going to do with it? And when it's in the platform, can we use it? So we need to do that thinking first so that we can make sure we structure the data right in the marketing automation platform and we bring it in the correct way. And we can only really do that if our data is consistent. So we've talked about that kind of clean data being needed. And if we are thinking of our platforms as an engine, our clean data being the eco-fuel, we need that fuel to be clean and running smoothly. So collecting consistent data from all of our sources is going to help us massively. And obviously we talk about our marketing automation platforms being able to clean our data, or we can set up programs to standardize data, but all of those programs we have to build, and it takes time. So if we collect data in a consistent way from the start, it's going to save us all that headache in the long run. Finally, we need to make our data collection purposeful. And this all comes from that strategic starting point of understanding or knowing what we're going to do with our data and why we're doing it. If we make our data collection purposeful, we don't have that set of data that is not being used. And we've touched upon this earlier. The number of times that I've worked with clients who, actually there's one particular one that kind of springs to mind, who made actually household goods, so tumble dryers and washing machines. And they were asking their customers when they first signed up to receive their newsletter, news about the tumble dryers, washing machines, fridges, to give their gender and their date of birth. And I asked them just in the session we had, what are we going to use this for? Are you planning on sending a birthday email to recommend someone buys themselves a nice treat of a new dishwasher on their birthday? And the answer was a resounding no. They're not going to segment their audience based on their gender and send them different marketing around these goods. So why were they collecting it in the first place? But more importantly, why were they collecting it at the point of sign up? All it was doing was creating friction for collecting these new customers or potential new customers. And it also meant they were holding data that they did not need, they were never going to use, and it was complicating the whole process. Of course, getting a birthday, if you're a restaurant, is going to be really useful because you can send those time-based triggered emails that are going to have a real value in bringing people in and their friends and all the benefits that can come from that. But you need to really focus on applying the the things that you're going to learn at conferences and all the recommended best practice to the organization that you're in and what your goals are in order to set things up correctly. The other kind of place that this data point comes into play a lot is in preference centers. And obviously we want to be compliant and make sure that we are adhering to our customers' wishes. And often that comes down to, right, well, let's ask our customers what they want. We'll give them a preference center. But I'm sure your experience is similar to mine. I'll go to a preference center for a brand that you might see, and it will say, what do you want to hear from us? And they'll have some options. And you could, I want to hear about this news or that news. And it's great to offer those options, but it's really important that when we offer those options, we are able to meet those desires of our customers. So if we give someone the option to only hear about a certain topic, we have to make sure we segment and send emails that adhere to that. And the number of times you will see a preference center which has 10 different options, of which you could select as many as you want, and you start to think about the incremental number of different segments that you would need to create, or the number of different pieces of content that you would need to create to serve all of those differing needs is huge. And very rarely do brands actually kind of adhere to that. So I think it's really important, although we want to make sure we're compliant, you need to make sure that if you're putting in place a preference center, you do it in a way that you can actually deliver on. The second thing here that we think is vitally important is content. And we're kind of quite aware, when you're talking about marketing automation and people in the room and people online, you may be in a marketing operations role. And actually your function is to set up the tools that send the emails, or set up the workflows and the customer journeys based on the data that you're getting. But it's really not much use to have the best marketing automation platform in place and all these workflows in place and all these emails being sent if the email that's being sent is unengaging, uninteresting, poor copy and poor imagery. As Joe talked about at the beginning, customers are expecting to be delighted in a way that they never have been before. So we need to make sure that the content that we're delivering with our marketing automation platforms on all our channels is going to resonate when it lands in the inbox or on their phone. So working with your content team, even if they don't sit in your function, is really important to make sure that we can deliver great content at all stages. And we also need to think long-term about measurement. So when we're developing our content, we need to also work out whether we can measure the interaction with it and measure the ways that our content is landing, so we can continue to improve and make sure the content that we're sending through the platforms or through the channels that we're delivering it through continues to meet the goals that we set right at the beginning. And on that note, in terms of measurement, I'm going to hand over to Anthony to talk about sales alignment.
Thanks, Andrew. So it's quite interesting, actually, because Maria brought this up earlier, that the sales alignment side is often kind of the most neglected part of this journey. I'm sure we've all been in marketing meetings where sales are complaining that the leads that they're getting are terrible, marketing are complaining that there's no follow-up, and ultimately it's because both teams often have different goals. They've got different targets that aren't necessarily aligned, and they're not necessarily aligned with business goals either. So in order to actually sort of, how do you deal with this? We suggest these sort of steps at least to start with. So first of all, it's important to understand your technology stack. So do you have a CRM? Do you have an automation platform? Do you have multiple automation platforms? What is being used by whom and for what purpose? Now, a lot of the time in different organizations, particularly if there's been a lot of acquisitions, they might have a double up of the same platforms that are doing the same thing, but for slightly different teams. And they're not necessarily talking to each other, they're not necessarily integrated, and it's very expensive to run that many different platforms. You have to have not just the licenses for those platforms, but you also have to have the expertise in-house to understand how each of those works. So understanding the technology stack is a good way to start, particularly between what are sales using and what are marketing using, and can they be connected together. So once the next stage of that is connecting your marketing systems to your sales systems. Now, in a B2B organization, that might be for instance, just plugging in the native connector for your automation platform to the CRM, and then bingo, everything works great. Maybe that you need to maybe you need to do a more custom integration because they're not necessarily compatible. But that's also a conversation of whether or not those are the right platforms for you if they don't talk to each other in the right way. Within an e-commerce platform, it could be a case of making sure that all of your advertising platforms, for instance, your Google ads, anything else you're running, are actually connected to the e-com platform, so you can have some sort of traceability back, so that you know that if someone has made a sale, can you trace that back to, say, an advert that you put out on Google? So that's kind of about making sure that all of those platforms are talking to each other. The next thing is, it's less about the technology, and it's about basically opening meaningful conversations between the sales team and the marketing team. And just sending an email every now and then, just saying, oh, we're doing a campaign, doesn't really count. You need to speak to them more often, and it needs to be a two-way communication. You need to understand what's working well. They need to feed back to you the things that they're not liking. So if the leads are coming through to them and they are cold, you need to know about that, because you can adjust your marketing to produce better leads for them. And then if they're not following up on leads, you need to know about that, because otherwise you're basically sending off leads that just disappear into a black hole and are never seen again. And then ultimately you don't have any way of recording whether or not there's been any successes from those campaigns that you've been running. And then the last bit here is really aligning sales and marketing goals. So having the same goals in mind can mean that both teams can work together. So often marketing teams might be solely focused on new leads generated or qualified leads, and those are great, but then you've got sales team who are more focused on actual sales and maybe churn, all of the things like that. Now, if you can bring those two together and say, right, we can actually see what sales we're getting from our marketing materials, then you can align your goals together. So marketing can be measured against sales goals. And then by doing that, you can understand what benefits your marketing campaigns and various initiatives are actually having for the business. Which brings me on to my next point, which is revenue attribution, which we found in the poll earlier is very low on people's sort of radar at the moment. And it's ultimately, it's the most important thing that you can really have, because this is how you measure success and failures for your business and your marketing team as a whole. Now, it's been pointed out that failures are important, and they absolutely are, because if you're not measuring revenue against your campaigns, you might just keep running those campaigns. It might be failing, but you don't know that. And that's where the revenue attribution comes in, because you can see, oh, this isn't working. We need to change our tack. And I've experienced that myself in various organizations where we've had various large campaigns are running, or maybe you've got a PPC team that are putting out adverts on Google or on social, organic, and they're pushing everything through and they're saying, look at how many people we've got. And that's great, but if there are no sales at the end of it, is that effort ultimately wasted? And the answer probably, maybe it is. And maybe that's a case of, right, we're targeting the wrong audience. We need to choose a better audience at the beginning of that stage, so then we can measure the revenue at the end. Now, obviously with e-com, the revenue attribution might be a lot shorter. You can send out an email, you immediately see that you've had so many sales generated off the back of that. Whereas in B2B, it could be longer, it could be 6 months, and there might be multiple touch points along the way. But by linking everything together and making sure you can track that, you can start to sort of understand how your campaigns are contributing to revenue. And then that kind of brings us on to basically bringing all this together, which is an account-based marketing or customer lifetime value marketing approach. So this is basically trying to get the most value out of those customers that you're bringing in, because ultimately each sort of acquisition of a new lead costs money. You need to make the most back from each of those investments that you do. So in order to make this work and to maximize the value that you're getting, you basically need these key points here. So you need to understand a clear ROI for any campaigns you're running. So how much did it cost to run that campaign? How much money did you get back from that in revenue generated from sales? You need to understand your budget and resources so that you can understand the investment that you've put in. You need to track and understand audience engagement, because if you can't understand that, you can't see what things people are interacting with and where they're sort of ending up in the journey. Because sometimes things might not necessarily just one point. It might not just be one campaign that triggers a conversion. It might be multiple campaigns. So you need to understand how they work together to create a sort of a halo effect around that. And then if you've got some clear goals and metrics, we can understand sort of this is how much money we want to bring back for this particular campaign, or we can understand how our marketing goals can be aligned with the sales goals and say this is how much revenue needs to be generated. And ultimately, this allows you to predict trends and campaign success because you've got previous experience. You know what's worked in the past, so you can do those things again. You know which things have failed, so you know you can avoid those and move on to something else. But it also means that you can prove your success in your marketing. If you go to a board meeting, you've got all of the other sort of department heads there. You can say, marketing generated this much revenue for the business, and I can prove it with these figures. And then ultimately, the main goal is to maximize revenue for the business and the return on investment for the marketing department, because the more money you can generate for the company, the more you can justify investment in other software, in expanding your team, because you can prove that you have a track record of success.
Thanks, man.
So welcome here. Thank you. Big hand. Thank you. I know we have questions from the audience also, but let me first, I have another question. You haven't really talked about that, but still we have touched on it in the event today, and that is actually the structure of, now we're talking about system structure here, CDP, Customer Data Platform, MA system, and a CRM system, or sales system, but say CRM system. What is the structure there? How should you think about it?
Well, it's going to change depending on what kind of organization you are. And it does depend what marketing automation platform you're using, because some marketing automation platforms will have the ability to hold a lot of customer data.
Okay.
And some marketing automation platforms may have more sophisticated ways that you can organize that customer data. You may not need a customer data platform. Some systems won't have that ability. You might need a customer data platform so that you can bring in those multiple sources, standardize them, and to do some segmentation work before you bring it into your marketing automation platform. In the B2B organizations, we work with a lot of organizations who are using a CRM, which is vitally important because the CRM is their central point of truth. So everything will update the CRM, and then that is pushed into the marketing automation platform where the segmentation, the decision making is done in terms of the outgoing comms. But actually the CRM is where the data is initially feeding in. Obviously, having the feedback loops in place from all the other systems that are handling and managing that data is vitally important. But having either a CDP or a CRM where there is that single point of truth is vitally important, so we don't end up with the dirty data of various platforms with different data on each.
Okay, good. Thank you. Maybe cleared up a little bit in my head. Do you have a question there, Daniel?
From the audience, do you have any best practices, examples of using CLV in a marketing strategy?
Ooh. So I can take this kind of when we're talking about CLV or ABM, it's really having a focus on kind of where in the customer life cycle your customers are. And to do that, you really need to have some data on your customers. You need to have that good source of data and a good way of categorizing your customers. One way that you can do it in e-commerce is using tools like RFM, which is recency, frequency, monetary, which allows you to categorize your customers by how recently they've purchased, how frequently they purchase, so are they repeat customers, do they come back multiple times, and what is their total spend. And by assigning scores for recency, frequency, and monetary value, you can put people into different categories of whether they are a loyal customer, a new customer, or a returning customer, and then you can market to them in different ways that is reflective of where they are in their customer lifecycle, but also how much that customer we can predict they will go on to spend, depending on what we give them.
A common model in the retail area, right? The RFM,
in e-commerce, much more. In the kind of B2B world, we would do account-based marketing. You'd look at the revenue that an account brings in. You might target specific accounts, even existing accounts, and try and sell more products or more services into those accounts. But they come from the same place in that we are looking at specific types of customer and what those customers can bring to the organization, and focusing on the ones that will generate the most revenue if we invest in maybe doing marketing slightly different to them.
Okay,
I think just on that point about the B2B marketing as well, I have been involved with organizations where they've got a very small target addressable market, some of them with less than 1,000 possible customers in the world. And having that sort of extreme focus means that you need to take the account-based marketing approach. You have to understand exactly who those people are that you can sell to, because you can't sell to anyone else. So you have to understand who they are, and then you have to understand exactly how you can market to those people. So that's kind of the slightly sort of like the different approach to the sort of mass marketing, whereas sometimes you can't sell to everyone.
Okay, thank you, Anthony, Andrew, very much. And so now